Some years ago, I had the opportunity to hear easy for me to say, Archbishop Desmond Tutu speak over at Southwestern University in Georgetown. And in his address, he was talking about the Truth and Reconciliation hearings in South Africa that followed the fall of the apartheid government. And if ever somebody could teach about loving your enemy and praying for those who curse you, it would be Archbishop Desmond Tutu and those who were involved in those Truth and Reconciliation hearings. In one of those hearings, an elderly South African woman listened to a soldier confess to the brutal murder of her son and husband. The judge asked the woman what she wanted from this man, and she had 3 requests. 1, she said, to take her to the murder site so that she could gather some ashes and give them a proper burial. 2, to become her family, to be her surrogate son, and absorb some of the love she still had by visiting her every 2 weeks. Can you imagine that? And 3, to accept her complete forgiveness for him, starting with the powerful hug she wanted to give him right then and there. If this woman can find the strength of love in her heart to not just forgive her enemy, but to make him a part of her family, is there anything the rest of us have experienced that cannot be forgiven? Today, in the passage Kevin read, we see just how radical a call to action that is. Jesus goes to the very edge and teaches us that we are to love even our enemies. But, we stammer, surely Jesus didn't mean I was to love that person. No, Jesus, not those people. Jesus couldn't possibly expect me to extend forgiveness and grace to him, to her. You know, as troublesome passages go, this is one of the most troublesome of all. We have a hard time seeing, do we not, that we are capable of this kind of righteousness that Jesus contrasts with what was being taught by the church of his day. Like the disciples, we want to proclaim, I don't have that kind of faith. But Jesus will assure us that we do, because we are people who are called to live out the kingdom of heaven, to live God's way. Jesus is telling us that walking his path, that following him, will lead to a transformation of our hearts, so that everything we think, everything we say, and everything we do will be motivated by love. Now, I want to be clear about something. I want to be clear that Jesus is not enumerating here a set of laws and rules for us to follow, as was so common in his day. He's not saying that if someone wants to beat you bloody so they can do harm to your family, that you should just sit back and let them do that. He's not saying that anyone should be able to take another's property and that person should just be okay with it. No, I think what he's trying to help us do is to learn to ask ourselves a different set of questions, such as, what is the loving response in this situation? What is the selfless response for the good of the other? What is the redemptive response? What should I do to help bring this situation to fit God's idea of how life is meant to be lived? So rather than focusing on vengeance, on paybacks, on grudges, which are often our first inclination, right? Our real purpose in life is to be giving and loving and forgiving. Love my enemies. Are you kidding me, Jesus? There are really, really, really good reasons that those folks and I are enemies. I'm hurt. I'm angry. I don't like him. You can't make a heart love somebody like that, right? So once again, Jesus teaches us that love is not so much a feeling as it is an action. And the action here in this passage that Jesus teaches is nonviolence and forgiveness. As one writer put it, loving our enemies means first and foremost forgiving them. Forgiveness is not ignoring evil. It's not denying wrongdoing or putting a false label on an evil action. Nor is forgiveness forgetting in the sense of erasing from our memory that evil act. Forgiveness names the evil as evil, but it eliminates the need to return evil for evil. Forgiveness releases the victim from the need for vengeance. Forgiveness means one gives up the desire to get even, to make that other one pay for his or her actions. And again, that's not to say that there are no consequences here. Certainly there are consequences, right? But when we forgive, we determine to let go of the need to retaliate or execute judgment. The old law declared an eye for an eye. And now, this wasn't a hard, fast rule that you had to demand an eye from someone who took an eye. It was instead a rule to help rein in unreasonable, wild-eyed vendettas that we are so often prone to. It was a reminder to keep punishment proportional to the wrong that was committed. In other words, you don't shoot somebody who cut you off in traffic. You don't burn down someone's house because they publicly humiliated you. Jesus is helping us go one step further. They're not meting out proportional punishment, but instead he's asking us to do what's really difficult, and that is offering forgiveness. Why? Because that's who God is, and that's who we're called to be. As hard, as difficult as that is who God is, and that's who we're called to be. I believe that part of the reason Jesus asked us to practice love and forgiveness is because it's detrimental to us as individuals to let anger and that inability to forgive take root and grow within us. When we do that, it distorts the human spirit and makes us less than who God created us to be. You know, the words wrath, wreath, and wraith are very similar. Wrath is defined as an intense anger. A wreath is a twist of flowers and vines or even smoke. And a wraith is a ghost, a spirit that can't rest, a spirit that keeps reliving the past, that can't get over it. Wrath, then, will twist us into people who are haunted, controlled by the past, and it will lead us to be people who are characterized by self-pity and cynicism and a joylessness in life. And that's not the qualities Jesus wants for God's children. So he tells us to forgive and to love instead. Now, I'll be the first to tell you there is nothing easy about forgiveness. You know that. The first thing we have to learn to do is to see that the person who hurt us is a person who is not all that different from us. But I would never do that thing that she did, we exclaim. No. Sorry. No, maybe not. Yes, our sins are different, but we do things that may be equally hurtful, but we somehow manage to separate ourselves from the other. Miroslav Wolf writes, "Forgiveness flounders because I exclude my enemy from the community of humans, and I exclude myself from the community of sinners." How quick we are to demonize those who hurt us, to assume that they are nothing like us. And so we can rationalize that they deserve to be treated as if they aren't also beloved children of God. One of the things God does for us is to bear our burdens, right? I mean, that's what Jesus did. He bore our guilt and shame there on the cross. As Jesus' people, we are called to also bear burdens, to serve each other, and to help make this world a reformed, a transformed place, more like God intended and originally intended it to be. So forgiveness, in some sense, is about bearing a burden. The word forgive is really an economic term that applies to debt. Forgive us our debt is how some of the earlier translations worded the prayer we pray each Sunday. Forgive us our debt as we forgive our debtors. When a wrong is done, there's a debt. There may be an economic debt, but there's also always an emotional debt. When someone hurts us, we feel strongly that they owe us, right? They owe us, and the currency is pain. We want to see them hurt. We want them to pay a debt in suffering. And if we're honest, we feel better if we see them paying for what they've done. We feel better when they hurt the way they pay. That's the way they pay down that debt they owe us, right? What Jesus is suggesting in this passage is that we pay that debt instead. When they disgrace us with a backhand, don't smack back. We don't disgrace them more publicly, humiliate them more viciously. Instead, we turn the other cheek. But how hard is that, right? These are difficult teachings that Jesus lays before us. There is no two ways around that, and I can't say that I'm good at following them. But this is the law of love Jesus sets before us. When someone belittles us, makes us do something fitting of an animal rather than an equal human being, we don't plot and strategize how we want to retaliate against them. We don't stoop to their beastly behavior. We save our dignity. Don't carry the pack just 1 mile, go another, he teaches. We are to decide to grant forgiveness. And yes, when we decide to do that, it will hurt. We want them to know pain, not us, right? But we can decide that we'll take it on. When they are hurling angry words at us, we will not lash back, because when we seek vengeance, we are not being about the truth and love. We're not living like Jesus teaches us to live. Jesus spared us the pain that was rightfully ours. He swallowed that bitter pill and hung on that cross so that we might know that love is more powerful than even sin and death. You know, God didn't lash out at us, didn't retaliate for all the times we failed to uphold our end of our relationship with God. God doesn't seek revenge for the wrongs we've done to the Holy One. In the cross, Jesus decided to take the pain upon himself, and here he is asking us, in a sense, to do that same thing. If we can learn to practice forgiveness, if we can stop fanning the flames of the fire of anger, if we can learn to serve one another by paying the price of the debt someone owes us, we will avoid becoming twisted, pitiful people who get stuck letting the past control our future. When we can do that, then the wounds begin to heal, and we can seek to restore relationship with our brothers and sisters. When we learn to share God's love, the love God has given us, undeserved and unmerited, then we can also want good for our enemies. We will recognize that they too make mistakes. Perhaps sometimes they even succumb to evil. But so do we at times, do we not? But Jesus said, I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who curse you. It's not an easy teaching. It's not one that we take lightly. And it's not one that we find easy to emulate. But yet it's the bar that Jesus sets for us, the hope he has for us, as we find ourselves transformed by the amazing love and grace of God that is each of ours in Jesus the Christ. Thanks be to God. Amen.